All right. Thank you for tuning into the Closure House. I'm Jessica, and today I'm honored to be joined by Jenn, whose journey through estrangement is really layered. She's been courageous. This is deeply personal. Jenn is currently no contact with both of her biological parents, but each story is a little different. So each boundary has been really hard earned. From being thrust into adult decisions at 14 and having to navigate motherhood while breaking generational cycles, Jenn's story is one of choosing truth over tradition and healing over obligation. So, Jenn, thank you so much for being here and for being willing to share your experience.
It's actually kind of one of those things where I've kind of gone back and forth on it, and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but I do feel like it's hard for me to open up just because of like what my dad's profession is, because he's a psychiatrist. So that's been kind of tough. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me.
Let's start at the beginning. Like, what's your earliest memories of your family dynamic before the separation?
So my memories of my parents when they were together. So my parents, they were married. We were kind of a pretty traditional family. Things seemed to be normal. I never saw my parents fight. However, one thing that was weird, looking back now as a kid, I see there were some underlying things. But my mom would go away for long periods of time. So my dad would say she's in the hospital, that she has TMJ. She was in the hospital for her jaw. And I was like, my earliest memory of that happening, I was probably in second grade. I had just started a new school, and my friend's family would kind of take me in for long periods of time. So it kind of sheltered me in a way that like my brothers didn't have. So like I
Mm-hmm.
really had no idea what was going on. Um and then when I was in third grade, my mom moved out
Mm-hmm.
and it just completely blindsided us. I really didn't understand it because again, they didn't really fight. Like we never saw them fight. I really didn't know, what was happening in my own home. And so I never really understood that dynamic. And then even after they were separated, they still continued to kind of act like a nuclear family unit. So we would do holidays together. They seemed to get along really well. So it was kind of a confusing situation at 9, 10 years old.
Yeah, that sounds super confusing. Not seeing any arguments or anything that would be like they're splitting up and now they're separated and kind of still acting like they're together.
Yeah. And I vaguely remember my dad alluding to my mom like having an affair, but it seems weird now looking back at that because I like can't imagine that he would have said those things. Like I feel like I vaguely had this on my radar or like I'd heard it somewhere else. So I don't know how really that went down. Um, but they stayed like pretty close as like a family unit, which again was confusing. Until I was about 12. So I guess I was in sixth grade. My mom and dad's divorce was finally finalized. And all the while, my mom was living with who is now my current stepdad. I believe she got married like um, days after they divorced, even. And then my dad started dating who is now his second wife shortly after that. And that's kind of when the cracks started to show in my family. Um, and it's funny too, looking back, like I wasn't super upset. I'm sure I was in some ways, but I kind of liked the like having the two houses. Like I don't know. I just liked something about that. I didn't like really resent the fact that they weren't together, but also it was kind of like they had two houses, but we were still family. So, but it was as soon as my dad started dating again that my mom, despite being remarried, had a really, really hard time coping with that. And knowing what I know now about my mom, like none of that would be a surprise to me as an adult. Like if one of my friends was telling me this about somebody that I recognized to be similar to my mom, I would be like, oh, okay, that tracks. Yeah, I would see that. But so that was like right around Christmas of my sixth grade year. And I also enjoyed I was the only daughter, so I was the middle child. I had an older brother and I have a younger brother. And I always wanted a sister, so my now stepmom had 2 daughters. One was a year older than me. She was in the same grade as my brother. And then, I mean, she still is. And then I have a younger stepsister, and she was quite a bit younger. I believe she was like 4 or 5 years younger. So to me, it was like, oh, I get like a little sister. I've always wanted one. I just had these stupid brothers growing up. And so, like, I
Yeah.
really liked that. And I really loved my stepmom. But what started to happen, and I mean, I don't have clear memories of this, but this is always was always pointed to by my dad, is that he always said that my mom made it impossible for us to be close to my stepmom. And that may be true. I don't remember anything specific, but I do know that my mom is very manipulative. So that's part of what happened with me cutting her off later in life for good. But my like, it was probably the spring of that year. One day we were at my mom's house, and things just seemed kind of dark at that time. Like, when I look back at it, I feel like it was like really gloomy that day, but I really don't know. But that's just my memory has made it that way, my 12-year-old brain. And my mom like pulled us into the kitchen. We were at her house, and she said, "I have to talk to you about something." And it was just the way that she like brought it up, that it felt like, okay, what are you going to say? Like, if anybody says they need to talk to me, it doesn't, I will rack my brain to figure out, what did I do? Like, what did I do wrong? I was like really nervous. Well, she then like revealed that she was an alcoholic, and she kind of told us about, and we were getting older, so it makes sense that she would have wanted to tell us, because, you know, like, there are kids that start drinking in junior high, and my brother and I were both in junior high. And so she kind of just told us like her family history, like, and that she started drinking when she was 19, when it was legal for her. And it, like she said, it was just like the feeling was like something she'd never felt before. And so she really struggled. Well, it made no sense to me, because this is another thing about my childhood. My parents never had alcohol in our house ever. So I didn't know that it was normal for adults to drink at all. Like, I was never around it. So if I went to my friend's house and their dad had a beer, like at dinner or watching TV, I would be like, oh my gosh, your dad's an alcoholic.
Yeah, because you're not seeing that at home.
No, not at all. Like, literally no exposure to it. So then there were other things, like, this is how naive I was. I remember I was watching TV, and my mom probably freaked out when I said this originally. But I had seen, you know, they used to have all those infomercials about like, oh, do you know someone who drinks too much? And I was probably around 8 at the time that I saw this. And in my head, again, no exposure to alcohol. I don't even know that I knew what it was. And I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, I think Dad has a drinking problem. He is always drinking Diet Pepsi. And like, this is literally what my life was like.
Yeah, what did she say? Because it was like that innocent mind of
Yes.
not even understanding what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I had literally no exposure to it. So I was just like, I don't think at that time I even had any clue what alcohol was. Like, I literally thought my dad just drinks way too much soda. Like, that's a problem. But I don't even remember what she said. I think maybe she laughed and was like, that's not what that means, or something like that. But I'm sure inside she was probably like, oh my gosh, like, this is, and eventually this was the conversation that we ended up having to have. Well, later, like that day, the day she told us, I was like, because I had no exposure to alcohol. I mean, I knew what it was at that point. I was 12. But it like rocked my vision of my mom. And to me, like, I think now, growing up, it is like, okay, I can look at somebody that has a drinking problem or a drug problem as having like a chemical dependence on something. And it doesn't mean that they are a flawed person. But when I was 12, I was like, you just rocked my world. And my mom is now this like flawed being. And this person that I idolized is just flawed. At the time, I still didn't ever put together that these, you know, weeks long stints in like a hospital for her jaw were not for her jaw. So, and that was never really clarified to me until I was older.
I had a question about
Yeah.
telling her her history and
Mhm.
like warning. Did it feel like a warning later? Like she's just opening up about what's happening to protect you and your brothers?
So, what she told us, and again, I don't know what to believe. Anything she says to me, I do not believe. And I don't know how to reconcile this in my brain because the reason she told us was, well, one, she did tell us you need to be careful about drinking. If you ever decide to drink, you need to be careful. And I took that very seriously. But then she said that the reason she's telling us is because at the time she was my dad's girlfriend, told her oldest daughter, and we went to the same school, and she was telling like her peers. And again, that may have happened. I have no idea because I can't talk to anyone about it without getting like I don't feel like I'm getting the truth. And like that'll
Yeah.
play into things more later when I talk about my dad. But it just I like there was a lot of manipulation that was like covert enough that like I
Hmm.
didn't see it that way. And again, my response was anger and disappointment, and I wanted to go to my dad's house. Like as soon as she finished telling us, I was like, you're not the person I thought you were, which it seems so silly now. And I would never do that. Like, if one of my friends came to me and was like, I'm an alcoholic, I would never be like, I'm leaving and I don't support you, period. That is not something that my adult brain would do. But like 12 years old, it just, and again, I couldn't make sense of it given what my life had been like. I had not been around alcohol. My dad never drank alcohol. So I just didn't have any understanding of it. And then um, so that was like a really temporary situation. Like I went to my dad's, I got over my like little angsty outburst and I tried to like reconcile it, but I was also deeply ashamed of my mom in that way. Like I didn't want anybody to know. But the irony of that is all of my friends' families knew because all of my friends' families knew that when my mom was gone, she was in rehab. But I didn't know that.
Right. Because they're like TMJ, so she has to be away, but in reality, she was going to rehabs.
Like think back and obviously my friends' parents were trying to help and protect me and whatever, but I think felt like how dumb I must have sounded as a little kid to be like, yeah, she has to be go to the hospital for her jaw. And people are probably like, did she break her jaw? Like if they didn't know the situation.
Yeah.
And so that was like really hard. But again, I was super lucky to have the people in my life that I did. I have and I always have had great friends around me. And those people that took me in the most, I still like I will do anything for them. I love them so much. Like I still talk to them regularly. Like the sisters treat me like I'm their sister. And so that has always been a blessing for me. Where my brothers didn't have that, and particularly my older brother did not. And so that was hard for him. And then like when all this came out, my older brother, which he's very much like my mom, but like a bit of a
Hmm.
pathological liar. He'd
Hmm.
make a great salesman. He told me like, well, yeah, mom was always drunk or mom was always doing this. And I was like, I don't have any recollection. But again, I was social. I was not home. Um, so he would say like, "Oh, I saw her spill pills on the kitchen counter one day." And like one thing that is weird like now that I look back and I remember my dad pointing this out. Like my mom worked off and on and she was in social work. She usually worked at like she usually ran battered women shelters.
Hmm.
But she was always in and out of work. So for a long time she was a stay-at-home mom, but we were all school age and she would nap as soon as we got home from school. So like
Oh.
she would be awake all day doing whatever and then she would nap when we got
Hmm.
home. And I never really thought anything of it because again, I was like, I'm just going to go out and hang out with the neighbors or I'm going to do, XYZ. But I never thought much of it. But now like looking back at that, I'm like, oh, so was it like she did something all day while we were gone? And then like she had to nap when we got home because, I mean, if you've ever drank too much, maybe, you sleep a little bit. Or
Yeah.
turns out she was also, her bigger problem was not alcohol, it was opioids. And this is also a very strange thing because to me, it seemed like such a wholesome thing that we were doing. And my mom would drive us about 30 minutes away almost every day, multiple times a week, sometimes with our friends, to this pharmacy in like a really small town. And looking back at that now, I'm like, oh, that's what was happening. We were getting pills.
So the only person who was aware was your brother? Was that she was drinking? Did he know about the pills?
He says he did, but I don't know. And again, he was a year and a half older than me, and he was home more than I was. But I have no recollection of that. I believe him, I think, but it's a strange thing because none of it made sense. None of it made any sense to me. And like the pharmacist was a very close friend of my family. So like went to his funeral. I didn't ever really even start to think about those things until I was like in my 30s. So like I'm 37 now, and I had already gone no contact with her at that point. But I really didn't even like process it. It was like one day I was talking to a friend because my dad has always said my mom has borderline personality disorder. And I don't
Mhm.
know. I mean, he's a mental health professional. So, and I've read enough about it that I'm like, okay, yeah, that tracks. But I don't know that that's an actual diagnosis from a medical professional that's not my dad. But like I was like worried at 30. I went on a walk with one of my friends and I was like, I wonder if you like what age you can develop that, cuz like I was like, it just really scares me that like I could come, end up with that. Uh
Mhm.
and if you read, I mean, you could probably diagnose yourself with anything, but if you read the like criteria for getting diagnosed with that, almost all of us could relate to at least some of it.
Yeah.
But it's not the extremes. I ended up asking my dad, and like I was like, "Dad, like, what age does that usually like onset?" Because like I just remember like taking psych, like everybody else in college, taking psych and being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get schizophrenia." Like
Yeah.
like just or like I'm
Yes.
still in the danger zone. um, it's like I think that's pretty common to feel that way.
Absolutely.
But so I asked him and he said that, borderlines are made and not born, which I don't know how true that is. I'm sure there's,
Mhm.
predispositions and things like that. He told me that he would tell me about my mom's like childhood if I wanted to learn. And I didn't really, because I had a very close relationship with her mom
Yeah.
and I didn't want that tainted. So, like, my memories of her mom were lovely and perfect, and I didn't want that tainted by something that actually doesn't really affect me because she passed away when I was 8. So, like, I don't need you ruining my memories of her.
I get that.
So that was hard, but then, so just to go back to the estrangement story, we still had our split custody situation with my mom and dad up until that point. Like, I moved on from my, like, anger or, like, disgust, really. And then when I was 14. It was right before I graduated 8th grade. So I think it was like a week before my 8th grade graduation. I've always been told they were in a custody battle. I looked it up on like a local like court records website and I found like that there wasn't a court date then, but there was one in July. So this is May. There was one July that year. But the day that she was leaving her house, I was very 14. I was angsty, and I did not want to be isolated at her house in the country with no cable and only my brothers. And so I was kind of being a brat, and I was like, I don't want to spend the whole summer here or like 1 week at a time. It's so boring, blah, 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 like classic teenager stuff.
Mm.
And she became so angry with me, and she was like, you're a terrible daughter. I can't wait for you to have a child that teaches you a lesson. And then she left the house to go to what I thought was like an appointment with her lawyer.
Mhm.
And then she was gone for hours and hours. And we ended up my brother and I, like, started to get worried, and so we ended up going to my aunt's house and just checking to see if she'd heard anything from her, and there was a voicemail on her answering machine, and it was my dad calling my aunt that my mom had been in a car accident, and it was a DUI, and her blood alcohol level was over point 0.3, and she had hit a mailbox. And so I was just so distraught at that point. Like, I couldn't believe that happened. And, like, again, it wasn't just that the car accident, like, there was the alcohol involved, but there was also what she said to me right before she left.
Yeah.
And at that point, she was drunk enough that she told the doctors or paramedics that my dad was her doctor. So that's who they called. And so that my dad came and picked us up, and I did not see my mom again until after I graduated high school. And my brothers continued to see her off and on as they could, but I just was like, very much, I'm not doing this. A couple years into high school, one of my very good friends, her dad was killed by a drunk driver, and I just kept thinking, like, because he was such a good man, he was such a nice person, and he was killed in a hit and run. And I felt so guilty just being around her, because I was like, that could have been my mom driving that car. That could have been, and I was so angry at my mom. And, like, it affected me pretty deeply. And then at the same time, we were now living in a blended family. There was, like, your typical, like, rivalry with, like, siblings, and especially I feel like in a blended family it was hard. So there was, like, and there was animosity, and again, there was a lot of guilt that my dad says was actually, like, actively put on us by our mom. I don't know how true that is. I don't have a memory of that. There's, like, I have very, like, foggy memories of that time. But things were just never, like, the same with my, like, that family situation anymore. And I understand some of it. There was probably some resentment on both sides. Like, they were pretty newly married. Like, they got married in the fall of my 8th grade year. And then all of a sudden we were living with them full time.
Did anybody ever help you process the trauma, though, that happened with your mom and this accident? Do you remember anything?
I mean, we saw counselors off and on, but, like, I definitely was not where I am now in being able to have these conversations. I was not where I am now. I can't say that I was open with any counselors. I had one counselor that I really liked. She would honestly let me just avoid everything, and I'm pretty good at avoiding. So I would just go in and gossip about people at school or whatever and waste the hour. And she was kind of like talking to, like, an older friend, maybe. Like, she wasn't ever pushing me to talk about things that were hard for me.
Yeah.
So I wasn't processing those things at all. And I really kind of internalized with my family. And it's really hard to talk about that time because it just felt so dark for me. And I feel like I look at it now as an adult and I'm like, okay, I was a teenager, my brain wasn't fully formed. But and I was internalizing a bunch of things, and I get on my dad's end, like, if you're newly remarried and, like, you want your alone time too. But then we went from having time where we were not at their house when my stepsisters weren't either to we were always there. And so I think that was hard for them. And it just kind of felt like, and I, like, again, I can't ever get this, like, truly acknowledged with my family, but, like, I felt like we were not really wanted. And it's hard now looking back as an adult because, like, again, I wasn't I was kind of a difficult child in that I was, like, angry, but I'm also very sarcastic, and I have a very different sense of humor than my family. But there was always, like, a lot more read into our behavior or my behavior. Like, if I was told to do the dishes and I didn't do them, like if I just put it off and avoided it, my dad would assume it was because I was being passive aggressive and I wanted to, like, hurt them in some way by not doing it. Where it's like, no, I just was watching MTV and I didn't really feel like doing dishes. Like,
Yeah.
I just was down in my room or whatever. And so there was just a lot of that. And we the stuff with my dad didn't really start to get, like, too bad until, like, I was graduating high school. So when I graduated, I ended up moving out when I was
Mhm.
18, and, we kinda had, like, a strained relationship. We tried, like, off and on to, like, like, reconcile, not even really reconcile, but it was just a weird dynamic, and I don't really know how to explain it other than I always felt like I was on the outside of my family.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like, feeling like you don't belong.
Yeah. And it's like I was like again, I was difficult in some ways, but I was also a straight A student. I was an athlete. I always had jobs. I babysat all the time. Like I was well liked by my teachers. I wasn't causing problems, but I was also
Mhm.
like in a really angsty phase of life. And that's one thing like those years are kind of a blur. With my dad, like it was just off and on. And I tried to rekindle with my mom, but again, it was just kind of like it just never felt like I had a family, if that makes sense, and or, like, the families that I see my friends have. And so I still kind of hung out with a family that I, like, stayed with a lot during my mom,
Okay.
going to rehab. Um, and I loved their family, and I loved their dynamic, but I wished it was mine, I just didn't have
Mhm.
that experience. But anyway, so, like, I've gotten older. I tried, like, rekindling with my mom, and, like, when I had my son, especially, I had him at 22. My mom was, like, trying to help us out, I was still in college, I was going to school, and I worked part-time, but she would try to babysit when she could, but my mom, again, like I said earlier, like, I just don't know what to believe of her. So there were always like, she would commit to babysitting, and then she would say, "Oh, I'm sick." And so, like, it
Mhm.
got to the point where it was every time, and I was like, "Okay, so, like, every time you say you're sick, it's because you committed to something and you don't wanna do it. That's fine." And so I just stopped believing her, and then she got lung cancer, and I
Oh.
did not believe that she had lung cancer. I was like, "Show me the
Mhm.
scans." Like, "I don't believe you." So, like, that's how bad the, like, constant, like, lying and excuses were with her that I really just had no idea if I could believe she had lung cancer, which sounds
Yeah.
heartless on my end, but, like,
No,
this
she
was
had a
my
pattern of
experience.
lies and
Yes.
half-truths, so it made it really hard to
Yes.
believe anything that was said.
Yes. And so my son loved her, like, as he got older, but it was because she was, like she would come in and she was, like, the typical grandma, and she, like,
Okay.
spoiled him with things that I wouldn't normally, like, let him do, like, she'd hand him her Kindle and let him play games, like, the whole time she was
Mhm.
babysitting, or, like, she would promise him these gifts, which, again, she was always promising things, but never following through, and it was starting to hurt him, and he was about 6 or 7, and I overheard him, and he, typical kid, he wanted, like, the newest gaming system for Christmas, and I had said no. Like, I was like it
Mhm.
was a Nintendo Switch, I think, and I was like, "You don't need a Nintendo Switch. You are like, you will not do anything else, and so, no. Like, end of story, you don't need one." So, I overheard her on the phone with him, and because he was talking to her on speaker, and so she said, "Don't worry, I'm going to get you one for Christmas." And so I grabbed the phone and I said, "No, I have told him no, and I don't want him to have one. It's not that, like, I don't wanna spend the money on it. He's not ready for that." And she called me a bitch, and he was on speaker still. And I was like, "You know what? I'm done." Because up until that point, like, he had started to, like, notice the patterns with her. And he would say, like, "She always says she's gonna do something, and then she never does, or she says she's gonna come, and she never does." And so I just was like, "You know what? You're trying to turn him against me, and you're trying to make me the bad guy with my kid," which is what she did with my dad's family. She did it with everyone. And so I was like, "You know what? I'm not doing this anymore. And it sounds kind of petty. There was a lot of other things that go in there, but this is when I was like, nope, it's starting to affect my kid. And I don't want him feeling this way, like the way that I constantly felt. And so I just said, you know what? I'm done. And she like sent me a bunch of hateful text messages, and I can't remember what they all said, but I just was like, we're done. Like, I'm not doing this. This is my boundary. So I blocked her number that day, and I didn't look back because I just, like, ultimately, it was to protect my kid. And
Yeah.
I just can't have him experience what I experienced with her, because there's so many other little things that, like, even I've forgotten. Like, I've had friends that'll bring things up, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that did happen. But I just couldn't let him, like, be hurt by her the way that I was. So,
She's not only just, like, turning him against you, she's also disappointing him. So, like,
right,
he's not knowing what to get, and he's believing
right.
this is family, this is love, this is the dynamic. So
Yes.
I see why you felt you had to
Yes.
protect him there.
Yeah, and if I give you things, it's because I love you, and you love me because I gave you these expensive things. And I just don't want that to be his dynamic with anyone. So I cut that off. And he had a really hard time about it at first, but he loves to eavesdrop. He's an only child and he loves adult conversations. And one night he was listening to me talk to my neighbor who's become one of my best friends. And we were just kind of comparing. She's no contact. And we were talking, and he overheard me talking about her. And later that night he came and he was like, "Is that why you did that? You cut her off?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Okay." And then he has really never mentioned her since then. Um, and so that, like, to me, I was like, okay, I know I've made the right decision with her because she has done so much damage in so many ways to so many people. I can't have this continue for my life. Um, and I mean, the first time I cut her off, I was 14. So, I mean, I had already learned that this is my protective mechanism. I can stop. And then, not that it doesn't hurt, but I can recognize when someone is unsafe for me. Um, so the stuff, so that's kind of my story with her, other than, like, she resurfaces every once in a while. Like I said when I emailed you, like, this is so funny to me. Like, it's laughable now, but I probably would have been hurt by it earlier in life. But that neighbor had lost one of her pets, went missing. And so I posted in a lost pets group on Facebook. And immediately I got a friend request, and it was from my stepdad. And I looked at it, I screenshot it, and I deleted it because I was like, okay, there's two things, because my mom's getting up there in age. She's 70, almost 71. And she doesn't take good care of herself. And so I was like, it's either she's dying or died, or she's using his Facebook to try to get to me, because she's blocked on everything. And it was the latter. She then the next day posted in that group, and I couldn't see it, but my ex-mother-in-law sent me a screenshot, and she's like, "Hey, is this your mom?" And she basically had said, requested to see me and my son, and asked if she could help us find this pet. And I responded, I have a very good relationship with my ex-mother-in-law, and I just said, like, this is ridiculous. Like, and how does she not see this is not normal behavior to post in a public forum, like, begging your estranged daughter to, like, talk to you and that you miss her? And my mother-in-law, who has had her own family things, was like, I feel bad for her. And I just had a hard time with that, because I was like, okay, but you didn't experience the things I did. I understand, but she's not healthy. This is not a healthy choice. Like, what she's doing to communicate with me is not a healthy or normal choice. So clearly we're not better. And so I just, I didn't really respond. Obviously I didn't see it, like, except for the screenshot. And so I sent it to my neighbor. And so she commented on it and said, "Hey, like, it's mine, like, that's missing." And then she said, she can't see this, by the way."
Yeah.
And then immediately my mom starts going through my neighbor's Facebook, and like she has her page pretty locked down, but there's a few posts here and there that are public, or for
Mhm.
some reason she could see them. And so every post she had on her page for the last like 3 or 4 years, my mom commented via like Facebook message. So my neighbor opens up her Facebook Messenger app to all these like really strange comments about like everything she's ever posted. Um, and it was almost like she was trying to get in with my neighbor to get to me, it sounded like. And like one of her profile pictures is me and her. So she knows that we're connected. Um, and we're close. So it was just so weird. And I was like, this is just so bizarre. This is such bizarre behavior. And I was like, this is
Mm.
exactly why you're not in my life, because this is chaotic.
Yeah, and that instability falls right in line with the diagnosis that you were told she
Yeah.
has, and then, like,
Mhm.
impulsive behavior too, so I can see why you were trying to protect yourself from her. And I was also wondering too, a lot of times people from the outside are like, they do feel bad for parents that have
Mhm.
estranged children. They're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I feel so bad," or you could just talk to them, but they don't really understand what you went through.
No, and I think too when I tell this story, sometimes obviously I'm giving the Cliff Notes version because like if I went through everything, it would take forever.
Yeah,
But I was just thinking as you were talking, like, one of the things, it's like that fear of abandonment, right? With
yeah.
borderline. And one of the things that happened after, because I was like, why was I so like steadfast in that decision forever? And I remember now. So when I cut her off, she started messaging my ex-husband and was saying she's super worried because I don't seem to be healthy and she's worried about and she just wants to make sure that like he will allow her to see him. And I was like, dude, no. And he and I, like, we had our ups and downs when we were first divorced, but we get along really, really well right now. And like I obviously get along with his family. And so it was just like a really strange thing. And he was just like, yeah, I'm not getting involved in this. Like, no.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
And he
Mm.
was totally like, no, I thought you might want to know. So that was nice of him to tell me that and like be on my side on that. So that was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago that I went no contact with her. And I really have never looked back on that. But my dad's story is a lot more recent. And his is a lot harder for me to talk about because my mom's is really easy to point to. Like I
Uh-huh.
can say alcoholic, addicted to opioids, borderline. My dad's is a lot harder because locally he's very well respected and like, he's like on the outside it looks super normal and it looks super healthy and it just never was for me after their divorce. And
Yeah.
well, not their divorce, but after 14, I would say. And I'm not placing all of the blame
Mhm.
on him and for that by any means. But I have come to realize as an adult, especially parenting a kid who is about the same age as I was. So, like, my son just turned, well, he's 14, almost 15. And so he just graduated 8th grade. And I'm reliving these things through him because I'm like, I look at him and I'm sure, like, anybody who has kids can understand. You look at your kid and
Yeah.
you know that, like, you felt so grown at 14. I felt like I was old. I felt like I was like, I don't know, super mature. And I look back and I look at him, and to me, he just looks like a little kid still. And he still has like such innocence. And I'm like, I was cutting my mom out of my life. I went no contact for the first time when you were 14. And around the same, so one of the things when I first started seeking answers from my dad, I'm a teacher, and I had a student who had to be taken into like CPS custody. And the first time they took
Mhm.
him, he went to like a close family friend. and he was still allowed to see his dad. He lived with just his dad. And this poor boy, like, he has forever a special place in my heart. He had been through so much. And I looked at this kid, and he was 7 or 8 at the time. And I was just like, man, he has experienced so much. And I was watching his experience with these things, and he seemed to be doing really well. And I was like, he's 8, and I don't understand this. And I had to be in the room when they told him the second time he was being taken, and that he couldn't go to this family friends. He had to go to a foster family, and they didn't know who it would be. And he just looked at the CPS agent and said, why? And he just said, why? And the CPS agent, which I was kind of taken aback by it, he said, your dad is doing drugs. This boy looks at him, he goes, oh, okay. So then we were walking back to my room to get his stuff, because as soon as he heard that explanation, he was like, oh, okay, so let's go. So I walked him to my room to get his stuff. And as we're walking, he looks at me and he says, he needs to stop drinking too. And I'm looking at this kid, and I'm like, you're 8.
How do you...
And like, yeah, and you've experienced so much, which like, but I was taken aback by the directness and the honesty of the person talking to him. And it wasn't an attack on his dad. It was just point blank, he's doing drugs.
Facts. Right.
And so I looked at that, and I was like, okay, obviously I would not trade lives with that child, because that poor boy has been through more things than most adults have been through.
Sure.
But he is so strong, and he had this understanding. And he didn't look at his dad as flawed. He didn't look at him as like, there's something wrong with you. He was like, he needs help.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that I watched, and I was like, I wish somebody had just told me. Like, just told me. Not made it this big secret, like, hidden thing, or like make it so like it's like a shame thing. And I struggled. So I started kind of trying to seek some answers out with my dad. And the response I usually got was, well, you're not supposed to talk bad about the other parent. Or you didn't want to know. Like, anytime I tried to talk to you about your mom, you didn't want to hear it. And that's true to a point, in that, like, I didn't want to hear things that happened to my dad and his relationship with my mom, because those are his burdens to bear. They're not mine.
Yeah.
I get it affected you, and it affected you as a parent. I understand that, but you can talk to a therapist about that. Don't talk to me about it. I don't need that information. What I needed were explanations of why you guys chose to not divulge this information. Like, what was your thought process? And it was just, you're not supposed to talk bad about the other parent. And it's like, I do think, and this is a conversation I've had a couple times with my therapist now. Like, she's like, well, that's true. And I said, well, yeah, but I don't think sharing a diagnosis like that is talking badly. I think it is just being honest in a way that's not placing blame or like making it shameful. And I think that affected how I managed my understanding of alcoholism or drug addiction, was because it was hidden in this like giant thing of shame.
And then you're not knowing what to make of it because nobody's being honest. And I think that, like, even at your young ages, as we're going through this, you had really good boundaries. You understood when things were being said that were out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things you didn't have was facts. So here
Right.
you're coming into confusing situations and you're having to put it all together yourself, when they could have just been honest.
Right. And I don't understand it. And I don't know if there's just like a different like approach now. I don't know, because I don't have that experience now. And I like, when I talked to my therapist about it, I said, she said, well, that's too young to know. That's too young to talk to them. And I was like, let me tell you about this kid. So like, I use that a lot to be like, yes, he experienced things that he should not have experienced, but people were direct and he understood what was happening around him. I did not. And I don't believe I was ever explicitly told. I had to like put it together that like, oh, this TMJ thing might not have existed.
So there's a difference between being transparent or telling somebody something too early and lying.
Right.
Like, her having TMJ and you thinking she's just at the hospital and everybody
Mhm.
in town's, like, knowing what's happening and you
Yeah.
don't is a
Yeah.
blatant lie.
Yes. And so this is kind of when I started trying to confront because I was like, I don't, like, make it make sense to me
Right.
why you chose this. And I'm telling you how it affected me. And I'm telling you that this is my experience. And this is how I felt as a kid. And I can't get anything other than I did the best. I did what was best and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
And pointing to this, like, you didn't want to know things. And I was just like, no, as an adult, you've tried to talk to me about your marriage and like things that she did that have nothing to do with me. And I don't care about that. And like, maybe that sounds
Right.
selfish, but like,
No.
I don't know what to do with that other than like, that's not my burden.
Well, it's also not what you're asking for too. If you think about it, Jen, you're like, "Hey, can you help me understand what's happening?" And they're like, "About this relationship that has nothing to do with it."
Yes. And so I just started to ask for things and I started to get very like, I started to kind of put up some more like walls, I guess, with them. Well, with him specifically. Because at this point in my life, I am, late 30s. Ugh, that sounds gross to say. Um, but I'm in my late 30s. I'm a teacher. I'm very well respected in my field, but I still feel like that 15-year-old when I'm around my family. And I feel like I am like this other. And like, just for clarity's sake, I am the only one of my dad's children from his previous marriage that continued to have a relationship with him or attempt to keep that going into like my later adulthood. And
Oh,
so like my older brother, he's very much like my mom and I cut him out when I was pregnant with my son, so I was 22. I haven't seen him or spoken to him. And my younger brother, he just kind of is I don't even know how to describe it, but he's like flighty. So like he just kind of like went off the grid. And so I'm just like, I don't know, like I
mhm.
would have a relationship with him. I don't have any issues with him specifically, but we just don't have that relationship. And so I'm the only one of his children from his first marriage that continued on. And like I said when I was emailing you, when I was in college, I took like sociology 101 and like this is the first time I heard the words replacement family. And I really looked into it and I was like, that just feels like my experience. It felt like I, like once he was remarried, it was like, no, I want this life
Mhm.
now. Right. And so anything other than that, and like, not to say we were perfect children, by all means, my older brother especially was not. My younger brother was kind of ridiculous, but I mean, I was not a terrible kid. And I just felt like I just didn't ever I was never good enough. And when I started to like confront those things most recently, so within the last year, I was just met with silence. And the biggest confrontation started with my younger stepsister getting married. And there was a bunch of things that happened and like I won't go into all the details, but it was just like message after message that I was not like I was not part of this as much as everyone else was. Like, and I was not there was lots of things that weren't communicated to me. And most notably, they were throwing a surprise birthday party for my stepmom. And she's been my stepmom at that point for what, 24 years?
Mhm.
So it's not like this was new. And I was upset. I found out about it from an aunt, like literally 2 nights before this was supposed to happen. I had not heard a word. And I reached out to my dad because I was upset. I was hurt because I was just like, I'm trying so hard to be part of this family. And like, I
Yeah.
feel like I was just like trying to fit and I wasn't fitting. And I messaged my dad and I was direct. I was probably a little snotty if you read it in a tone. But I was like,
Uh-huh.
was anybody going to tell me? And he was like, "I don't know, take it up with your stepsisters. They planned it." And I was like, "Well, first of all, it's the rehearsal dinner night, so I am not texting like the bride to be on the rehearsal dinner to confront her about something. And I'll see them tomorrow." And then, but I was upset because in my head, like, your job as a parent in a blended family is to make sure that your children are like part of that, I guess. And I just was like, why are you making excuses or like avoiding this? And you should be mad that you're the only child from your first marriage was just completely forgotten about in this situation. And like, there's been many things like that. Like, I have a half brother who is 19, almost 20. And when he graduated, like 8th grade, I live within the same town as my family, and they forgot to invite me to the graduation. Like, literally called me 30 minutes before and were like, "Hey, can you come?" And so it's just like, there are little things like this my entire life. And it's just, it got to the point where I'm like, I am past this. I'm done. And so I decided I was going to confront them. But at the same time, um, my stepmom's sister, who I really loved and admired, who was always very, very kind to me and treated me like part of the family, was dying of cancer. And so I was like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to let this die down. And so I waited and waited. And then I finally started to I was sending messages because I am better at communicating in writing. I like to be very careful with my words. I like to be able to edit. And I also like having it so I can point back to it later. And this was just an emotional thing. And I knew if I went to my dad's, I was probably just going to start crying and I would lose my whole message, or he would like get me off track or something. And so I put things in writing, and I never got a message back. And I never got a message back. And finally, it was, the spring, there were little things that happened here and there, but it's just like those, like, those million cuts that I just was like, you're not responding to me. You're not upset that I've stopped coming to family things. You're not trying to reconcile. And he would still send me messages, but they'd be like a picture that he thought was funny from like the newspaper, like a comic or whatever, an article that he thought was interesting. And I just was like, so at that point I was low contact. And then
Things that you would have liked or things that would have been appealing to you?
so a lot of times it would be about like teaching. And so like, yeah, they were mildly interesting, but it's also like the message above this is me asking you for an explanation and me trying to explain to you that like, I don't understand why like you're still not treating me like part of this, or like you're not willing to try to salvage this relationship. And so this was all like around last spring, summer, and at the time I was getting out of a really, really bad relationship. And it occurred to me that during all of that, all the terrible things that were happening in my home, I never once wanted my family. I never once wanted them to like help me. I never sought advice from them. I had my friends, and they were my support through all of that. And it was kind of like an open, like, it was just like this huge realization for me that like, no, like, I don't have to try to be part of this family that has kind of shown me that they don't want me, at least want me in the way that like I would like to have a family. And so I started kind of like thinking about like I was going to send another message, and I sent one final message, and it was probably a little bit angrier, more heated than my previous ones. And the next day I came home from work. So I guess this was fall. So it was last September. Came home from work, and there was a 4-page letter, single spaced, in my door.
Whoa.
And it started out like basically saying I didn't want to send this letter, but you left me with no choice. And it went on to detail like basically it went to pick apart every single thing that I have ever tried to confront him about. And there was no recognition for, like, the fact that I am not like, they hold me accountable still, like I'm still 15, that I'm still this angry teenager. But then, like, on the flip side, I have a brother who's 19 who's angsty and was, like,
Uh-huh.
refusing to go to school, and I had to go, like, help try to convince him that, like, you have to go to school. And he was very smart, but he was like, "I got into college, why would I wanna go to high school anymore?" And it's like, "'Cause that's life. You have to jump through hoops to get to the next one. I don't know. Like, you have to graduate first."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was like, I'm watching that, and I mean, not that I can say he has had no trauma, but he hasn't had the experiences that, like, I had, or even, like, my stepsisters had.
Yeah.
Like, he's had a really, like, he's had a life where people, like, he has been in a two-family home, they get along well, like, my dad and stepmom love each other very much. They do. And he was always taken care of. He never had to really have a job. Like, he just had this life. But there was excuses after excuse made for him. And I'm like, I couldn't even get, like, I can't even get you to acknowledge that I was 14 and cut my mom out and was, like, grappling with this, like, basically not even feeling like I understood my childhood. And I had
Yeah.
reasons to be angry. And I like, the last part of the letter, I'll never forget. I, like, took it, I got it, and I was like, well, thank goodness I have therapy tonight. I
It came
took
just
it.
in time.
Oh, yeah, like, there was serendipitous. Um, and I read it to her, and I kind of went through and kinda did, like, I annotated it, and I said, like, "This is what he's talking about."
Uh-huh.
And, like, every single thing, it was like, "You're wrong about this." He didn't say those words. But then he also, at the very end of it, and I'll never forget this because I was just like, "Okay." And it said, "I want to have a close relationship with you, but I can't because of the way you feel." And to me, that was like the kiss of death on our relationship. And I just said, because I was like, there was no accountability, there was none. And I just, I don't know. I can't believe I live like a mile from my family and I don't speak to them. And I don't feel like it. I don't know. And I obviously don't know his experience. I see like estranged parent TikToks sometimes.
Ugh.
But like the way his letter was, it reminded me so much of some of those TikTokers that are like, your parents, you're spoiled. Like, you should, like, recognize the things that we did for you and those types of things. He didn't actually come out and say that, but
Yeah.
that's just the vibe of this. And there was just no accountability. And it's like the whole, like, because of how you feel, you feel that way. Sorry.
Yeah.
Wish you felt differently.
Not how being confused during, like, puberty
Right.
impacted you. Like, there
Right.
was a lot that he didn't do, and not taking accountability is exactly that dark side of TikTok, estranged
Right.
parents, where they're like, "You should just be in my life, and you don't have the right to feelings."
Yeah. And one of the things, like, when I first started therapy, because I started therapy last summer before this letter hit my doorstep, and I started talking to her about this. And it was my first session, and she was like, "Oh, in my first session, I like to we'll just talk about light, airy things." And I go, "No, no, no. I got something to talk
Mhm.
about." So, like, she ended up keeping me for almost 2 hours because
Wow.
I just kind of went through all the things and I went into more detail about some of the things I've told you. Um,
Uh-huh.
but she she was like, "Okay, well, here's what we need. We need to pick one thing that he can do that will make you feel like he's putting in some effort and he's trying to meet you somewhere in the middle." And she's like, "And also, I don't think you need to address any issues with anyone else in that family, because, like, obviously there's other things, but
Yeah.
you don't need to address any issues with anyone else until you and your dad can have this, like, breakthrough moment." And I took that to heart, and I really didn't, like, place blame on anyone else in these messages. It was like, "This is how I feel. And this is, like, I'm, like, frustrated because I just want you to acknowledge it, basically.
Yeah.
And it just never happened until I got this letter. And the other thing was in this letter, it was in like, a manila envelope, and there was a handwritten letter from my
Uh-huh.
stepmom in it. And I started to read it. It was handwritten, and it was kinda hard for me to read anyway, so I was getting bits and pieces, and it was multiple pages. I ended up throwing it away. And
Uh-huh.
maybe there's something that I could have reflected on in that, but this wasn't about her. It was about my dad and me. And it's,
Yeah.
"You're getting older. I'm the only one from your first marriage, and I, am begging you to have these conversations, and you're refusing." And so it's just, and then just to put a letter in my door, like, instead of inviting me over and being like, "Let's talk." Because the only time he actually responded to something was when I said to, well, there was something that would happen with my stepsisters, and I don't really want to go into it, but it was kind of a
Uh-huh.
pivotal time where it was like, I don't know if I want to be part of this. I don't know if I will be part of this family much longer. So, like, I'm not committing to anything, you know, and this would have been a long-term, lifelong commitment for me to make. So
Yeah.
I was like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't." It was, well, I'll just say, one of my stepsisters asked me to be the godmother of her youngest child, and, like, well, that was super sweet, and I do believe that my older stepsister is the only one who genuinely tried in any of this situation, and I understand what she was doing,
Mhm.
but one, I'm not religious, and I said, I'm not religious. That was my first answer. But really in my head, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to see him again. Because if I'm not part of my dad's life, I'm not going to see this boy. And I can't commit to, like, being that person for him if I don't know that I will ever see
Yeah.
him. And, and I appreciated her. I genuinely saw the effort. She was the only person who kind of, like, tried to apologize to me about some of the things that happened at the wedding, and I really appreciated her trying, but I couldn't commit. And so when I told my dad, who I thought would understand because he's not religious, and my stepsister is a pretty devout Catholic, and so I respect that enough.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, my dad might understand what I'm saying. And he responded to me that I should say yes, it's an honor. I shouldn't even have to think about it. And so I was like, "You don't get it." And so then after that, he said, "Well, you should come over and we can talk about you and your stepsister." And I'm like, "This isn't about her. Like, you're missing the point of this. Like, it's not about her." Again, she was the
Uh-huh.
only one that really tried, and I really appreciate her. Um, and she's really the only one that I haven't, like, fully gone no contact with. We're very low contact, but we kind of always were. But the only one I haven't, like, completely stopped speaking to is her. And so, because I did
Uh-huh.
value that she tried, you know? And so my dad not confronting the things that had very directly to do with him and making it just about, like, my relationship with my stepsisters felt so diminishing, and that I just was like, I'm not doing this. And so I sent him one final message, and I said,
Mhm.
"You're," I was angry when I sent it, I'll be honest. But I was basically like, "Your letter, the
Yeah.
Cliff Notes." And I said, "No accountability, no need to change, no contact with me." And I just blocked his number after that. And
Yeah.
I I haven't missed it. I really have not. I've missed some, like, major milestone birthdays with him. I missed holidays. But you know what? I spent Christmas, my first, like, I call it my orphan Christmas,
Uh-huh.
with my best friend and her family, and I had a lovely time. And so I just feel like there is no part of me that regrets it. Do I wish
Yeah.
things had gone differently when I confronted? Yes. But I have, and I'm very lucky, and I will acknowledge this forever and always. I have always been very lucky to have people around me who are not blood related to me,
Mhm.
who care for me and are there for me, and I would take them any day over my like the family that I had. So my bio family, I'm closer to the people, my friends. And so I know not everybody's that lucky. And I know there's lots of people. Like, I think about my older brother, he didn't have that. And
Uh-huh.
so I know I'm lucky. And I think that's probably why, like, my life turned out a little bit differently than his. But the other takeaway that I have is I never want my son to have to mourn a parent who is still alive, because
Yeah.
it's hard. And it's hard when people do not understand it. They think it's a selfish choice, but
Yeah.
really, maybe it's a selfish choice, but also, like, I'm choosing me finally, and I'm choosing my feelings. I'm choosing to protect myself and my peace, and I'm not going to apologize to anybody for doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part is that the people around you are always like, "But that's your mom, but that's your dad."
Mhm.
And it's like,
Mhm.
I've learned to just say that's not good enough. Like, because if they
Yeah,
didn't have those titles, they would be nobody in my life anyway. And I
right.
know that that sounds really harsh to people who don't understand, but when you have to go through therapy, healing
Mhm.
the inner child, every relationship, this showing up, and when you have to spend your life undoing the damage that they did, would have been prevented. It makes it
Right.
really hard to wanna endure any more damage, especially when they won't be accountable. I think accountability alone would have been enough for me.
There can be no healing for me and my family if there is no accountability. And, like, on both ends, like, have I made mistakes? Was I perfect? By no means, no. But I also think the refusal to answer for some of the things that I am now telling you, like, one of the responses in this letter was saying the like we talked about with them not telling me about my mom being an alcoholic or having a drug addiction. I'm telling you now how confusing that is for me. And
Yeah,
you're still like, I wouldn't change it. And it's like, if my adult child comes to me someday and he says, you hurt me in this way, or like this was hard for me, or it changed my, like, how I felt about whatever, I
mhm.
would try to listen to him and have some accountability on that and say, like, well, yeah, like, I thought I was doing what was best at the time, but hearing you now tell me that this is how it affected you, I wish I could go back and change it.
Yeah, but instead, it's like I do it the same way, and
Right.
even though I hurt you in
Yeah.
doing it that way.
And I think that was, like, one of the harder, because I'm like, I don't understand, like, even that one, like, I'm like, how can you not hear me tell you that I was so confused about my childhood? Because, like, it was never clear to us. So it was never talked about afterwards. Like, once it was revealed she was an alcoholic, we didn't go back and clear up some misconceptions that I had. It just
Yeah,
was like, okay, like, past is past. And that was really hard. And, like, now as an adult, like, I mean, I'm literally 30 being like, oh, she was in rehab.
yeah,
Okay. Like, that's what that was. And it took me a long time. And I had to even ask, like, did she actually have TMJ? Because my dentists were always told my mom had really bad TMJ and that I, might need breaks and things
yeah,
like that. And so it's like, was that true? I don't know. And so that was really challenging. And that's where I'm like, when I'm telling you these things and you're saying, wouldn't change it, I don't understand that.
yeah, being dismissed. So you take that and not being accountable, and
Right.
it's like it's not the give and take that make relationships work. If
Yes.
you're not gonna be accountable and you're not gonna right your wrongs if you could, even with just a sorry, you
Hmm.
know? So
Yeah.
it's like I hear you, and that's the part that the estranged families counterparts don't get, I feel. They're
Yeah.
just like, "Just just be in my life because that's what I
Yeah.
want from you."
Yeah. And it looks good. Like, and that's the thing too. Like, this year I had some, like, really big celebrations in my career, and I was kind of relieved that, like, I don't have to invite people who only show up when it looks good, or like only
Yeah.
are there or like proud when it looks good. And that is
Mhm.
so, like, it was so freeing for me that I was like, I don't have to invite them to this award ceremony, or I don't have to, tell you about my promotion. And so, like, those types of things that, like, I accomplish, but it's like I did it without your support and I don't have to include you into that moment for me now. Like I don't
Yeah.
feel obligated. And so that was really freeing too. And I think like when I first saw like your TikTok about this podcast, like I love the idea of like the closure house where you have, you know, the chance for maybe a conversation. But I
Yeah.
like by the time I got to where I was with my family, it's like no, I'm past that. I'm healing. Like I don't need that conversation anymore because I got the answer that I needed from them and from my dad, and I won't open the door to my mom again.
Yeah.
And it's weird in some ways to be like, I don't really have a family, like a blood family. I mean, I have a couple family members, like my cousin I'm close to. But it's really, I don't feel bad about it. And I don't need that conversation anymore. Like, I
Yeah.
wanted a healing I wanted something to move in one direction or the other. It just happened to go the direction that I wasn't really expecting. So, but I feel very at peace with that.
So one of the things that I'm learning as I'm doing this, and I really thank you for your, initial comment and saying
Mhm.
like, I would, I'll tell my story. And that's what most people are saying. They're like, I'll tell my story, but I don't want to involve my family.
Mhm.
Once I sit down with people, it's like, I understand why, even
Mhm.
with my own family, I really do.
Yeah.
But one of the things that kind of sets you apart, there's only a few other people, is like you have a chosen family now. Some
Mhm.
people are like literally by themselves.
Yeah.
So it's really good to hear that you have, you know, a different definition of what family is today.
Yes, and I like again, I acknowledge like I am fully very, very lucky for that because even like I told you, my neighbor has her own, like, no contact story, but she
Yeah.
doesn't have that the same way, and she said, like, when we met and we started to become friends, she was like, "You have a lot of friends." And it's like, I have a lot of really, really good friends that I can count on, and I think part of that, like, it was established because of my mom,
Uh-huh.
because she was going to rehab and I was kind of placed with my friend's family for a lot of my childhood, and they really took me in. Like, that established, I think, for me, this, like, dynamic of, like, oh, I can feel at home with other people's families, and I
Yeah.
think that was probably what changed. That's probably why I am like where I am in my like journey with like healing from all this is that I've always had that and I
Mhm.
know I'm lucky. So I do feel for people who don't have it and I've kind of started to kind of heal out loud a little bit on like
Yeah.
Facebook or whatever and I'll just share. Like around my son's graduation I shared that it was really hard for me. I was going through a lot. Like Mother's Day this year was really hard,
Uh-huh.
because he was, like, 2 weeks out from graduating, and I was like, "I was your age, and you're still such a baby."
Yeah.
But I really thought, like, if there was somebody who needed a chosen family, like, I will be yours. I can sit and listen to you. Like, tell me your story. May not have good advice, but I will listen, and I will not judge you for going no contact or anything like that. So that's been really good for me. I haven't had anybody take me up yet on that. I mean, my neighbor and I kind of have like our own little like experience where she's really one of the only people I know that's gone no contact with her family. And she's low contact with some of her family, but
Hmm.
um like she's probably the only person I really know that like has experienced it with me. Um
Yeah.
and so that's nice, but, if somebody did wanna talk, like one of my friends, I would absolutely listen to that because it is hard if you feel like you don't have anybody who can understand, and, I mean, right now, we're kind of, like, bombarded on the internet by, like, estranged adult parent or estranged parents who are using their platform to, like, kind of shame that, and I've seen a few
Yeah.
that are, like, they're like, "Oh, I was estranged, and then this is what I realized." And so those are the ones that I like to see, but
Yeah.
so many that are just like, "Your kids are spoiled," and it's like, this isn't out of. Yeah.
One woman said, you owe your parent your life. And others, because I've ended up on that dark side as I'm doing research for this, And one of the things I keep seeing too is like people saying, I'm cutting off the inheritance. Like, I want to make it very clear that I would have had a very good inheritance. I never would
Mhm.
have had to work again. My kids wouldn't, my grandkids wouldn't. And I
Mhm.
walked away from it because it was never about that. For
Yeah.
me, it was about really just wanting the relationship. But
Yes.
it had to be transparent,
Mhm.
and it had to be accountable. And the other thing that I put here for you is like, I think your story is so powerful because I love how you are so honest about your anger. I
Yeah.
really believe anger is the emotion that loves you the most.
Mhm.
Seriously, it's like I will protect you, and it's always an indicator that your needs aren't being met.
Right.
So anytime I'm actually doing therapy with someone and they're telling me about anger, I'm like wondering what those needs were. And you're
Mhm.
highlighting them here, and they weren't
Yeah.
met.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, when I look back at like high school or whatever, it's hard for me to be like, I can point to like singular events, because it kind of all blurred together because I was really struggling. I loved my mom. Like, I idolized her, and it was really hard for me. And then again, I had that like guilt and shame and anger. And, I was like I had such confusion about where my
Yeah.
anger was placed even because like I didn't okay, so I never drank until I was like 26 because
Mhm.
I was like, I don't even want to risk this. But like when I was in high school, like I had some friends that started to drink and that's normal. Like kids do that. They do. But
Yeah.
I was angry with them. And so it was such misplaced. And like, I like kind of had friends who I'm super close with now again, but like we kind of grew apart in those days because I couldn't get past it. Like I
Yeah.
just was it was so misplaced because I kind of placed blame on alcohol where that wasn't the problem.
Yeah.
Like it was like part of the problem, but the confusion over it was not like, it wasn't alcohol that I was, like, angry. I was angry at my mom, you know?
Yeah.
And I was angry at the situation I was living in, and I just, like I think back about that, and I'm like, "It seems so silly now," but I was 15, my brain wasn't fully formed, so
Yeah.
yeah. But and I again, like, when my friend's dad was killed, I just, like I I had a hard time because I was like, "That could have been my mom that did that,"
Yeah.
and that was just such a hard moment. Or it was kind of like, why couldn't it have been my mom that was killed? Because like she's not even doing anything for this world, which like sounds so terrible, but I was 15, so
Yeah, I get it.
so you guys can blame 15-year-old me, like she's not here anymore, but
Yeah, but you take this person who's, like,
yeah.
such a good person, and then the way
Yeah.
you described him, he sounded like a really just a nice and stand-up guy, and then he
Mhm.
gets killed that way, and it's like, here's my mom doing all these horrible things, and
Mhm.
yet, she kinda survived all these things that she's even done to others. It's just a weird dynamic at
Well,
that age where you're like one or the other,
yeah.
right?
And one of the things too that was harder for me was that like he was helping his daughter and he had done everything that he could do. And it was like my mom was just drinking because she was mad that like her daughter was being angsty. Like it's
Yeah.
those types of things that like I was really struggling to like reconcile in my head. Like this could have been her that did this to you. And like now looking back, like obviously not a rational thought, but just
Yeah, but at the time, it
yeah.
fit.
Yeah. And I was still so deep in my grief over my mom that
Yeah.
like, cause it was hard. I mean, it's hard because I feel like, especially when you're in high school and like you're getting ready to go to like dances and stuff, like you want your mom.
Yeah.
But there's really only been one time since I've cut her off that like so my mom was a huge animal lover, she still is, I'm sure. But, I mean, I guess we can point to that Facebook thing to say she loves animals, so, but I lost, one of my animals in a really traumatic way, and it involved my and this is part of, like, where I started to get to the point of, like, I was so broken down that I
Mhm.
stopped accepting being treated badly by other people, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I was so broken down because my son was grieving, and I won't go into it because it was bad, and I don't wanna have to trigger
Yeah,
warning, but
understandably.
but I was so broken in those moments because my son was like, he was blaming himself and he had said that he wished that he would die. And like, the first time he went to his dad's after that, the first night I was alone, because he started sleeping in my room
Yeah.
after that happened just for comfort. And I had not been alone with my grief because I had to be strong for him.
Yeah.
And I broke down and I was like, I want my mom because my mom would understand how I feel right now. And like,
Mhm.
I was like, obviously, I'm not going to break no contact and call her about this. But that was one thing that, like, has been like the one time that I was like, I want to talk to her. And I think I even said it directly to my dad that I want her. And he was like, I like, I'm not an animal lover, but I like will listen. And I was just like, it's just not the same. Like, you will
Yeah.
not understand the level of grief that I am feeling right now and the pain.
Mhm.
And especially because it was tied to my son's grief and pain. And so that was one of the things that I just like, that was the only time I've ever like had like that little kid moment where you're like, I want my mommy.
Yeah.
But I felt that, but then it's like, but I still like, I'm calling my best friends and
Yeah.
I'm crying to them and they're coming. Like my neighbor came over and like sat in my bed with me while I cried for hours. And so like, it's just like, I don't have my mom, but I have people, and I think that's, like, such a powerful thing for me in my healing from it.
Yeah. And what do you want the people who are listening, who might be considering going no contact, to understand the most?
Um, that's kind of a tough question. I think maybe just that, like, if you start to feel that you are no longer getting anywhere, if you're trying to confront those hard conversations with your family or you're trying to address those and you are not getting accountability. You're gonna have to make yourself smaller so that you can continue to have them in your life, and I think or you're gonna have to settle for less than what you deserve to have them.
Mhm.
I decided I am no longer accepting people who make me feel less than or will not show any accountability or forgiveness for things that happened. I mean, when I'm talking about forgiveness, I'm talking about, like, I was 15.
Yeah.
16. And so I just feel like you have to at some point accept that like maybe going no contact or low contact could be an eye-opening situation, but it also might not be. And I honestly, you have to decide what are you willing to continue to accept for
Yeah.
yourself. And I think that was my biggest thing. Like, and again, I had gone no contact with my mom when I was 14. So like this was not a new thing for me. So I think that's one thing that probably sets me apart from a lot of people, like a lot of adults trying to do these things,
Yeah.
that I had already done it and I had already found that was a strategy that I could use to protect myself. And I have tried, reconciling multiple times with people, and ultimately it just doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to decide, and I don't think there's anybody who can tell you when. It has to just be, you have to get to that point on your own, and I think it's okay to have those moments of, like, doubt and go back or, especially if you don't have a strong support system like
Yeah.
I do, needing them. Because there are people you do need, like, I mean, a lot of people rely on their families for childcare,
Yeah.
and that would be a really tough if you are in a position where that's you're relying on that, you kind of have to decide, like, is this worth it for me? Do I have another option? And I think that's hard, and I think you have to just give yourself some grace over those types of decisions too.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with setting boundaries and
Mhm.
just changing the contact if you have to still engage. I went low contact, no contact a bunch of times.
Yeah.
It was when I've decided like this is it for me. And
Mhm.
I think that that's the decision someone has to make on their own. Nobody
Right.
can make it for you. So I love what you said, and like trying to find people who fill some of that void. Like
Right.
obviously there won't be somebody who's completely, in your mom's spot, but there's somebody you can call when you need a
Yeah.
hug because your animals passed.
Right. And There's just so many things. It's like when I was going through, like, I mean, that whole year from like November on was just absolute hell from like November to like September. And I just remember looking back and being like, I didn't once miss them or like
Wow.
want that or
Uh-huh.
lean on them for this. Like there were times where I leaned on resources like, my dad's well connected in the mental health field. So I was like, I need my kid in an emergency session. And he did help me do that. And I appreciated that very
Yeah.
much. But I also like, I just can't continue to like open myself up and get hurt by these people
Yeah.
anymore. And I just, again, like the situation that happened with our cat, like I know it sounds crazy, but it was that point where I was at my lowest that I was like, no, no, I'm not accepting this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to rebuild. I had gotten broken down to the lowest point I think I've ever been in my life. And
Mhm.
I knew that I needed to rebuild. And sometimes when you do that, there's things that no longer fit in your life. And that's kind of where that started for me, where my like resolve
Yeah.
came from. And for me, I don't think there will ever be a time where my dad's feelings change.
Hmm.
So the letter was kind of like the nail in the coffin for me because I read it and I thought, okay, like this isn't coming from someone who wants to fix this.
No.
I want you to know that you're wrong and I want you to know that this is how we feel and what you did, but I'm not going to tell you that I agree with anything you said. And um so when I got that, I was like there's no time in his life. Like I don't, there's some people that on their deathbed they'll request, to see you. I don't think that will happen for me. Um
Mhm.
and I think I'm kind of at peace with that. The only thing I think is if my dad lost everything. So if like my
Yeah.
stepmom, I please do not ever take it this way. I do not want anything to happen to her.
Yeah.
Um,
But if
and I
for
don't want
some
them
reason
to.
something did, is what
Yeah,
I hear you
yeah,
saying, that
yeah,
he would be down to
yes,
nothing and then
yes,
he may have to change.
yes. And I think like like if they were to get to a divorce, which they love each other very much, I do not think that that will happen. And like my dad's a lot older and a lot worse health than my stepmom, so I don't think anything would that would
Yeah.
happen. And I don't want it to happen, trust me.
Yeah.
But that is the only time I foresee him being broken to a point of like, I should reach out or I should try.
Yeah.
And so I just don't see it happening. And I don't know, like one of my friends, so my neighbor went um to her mom's side when she was in the hospital. And I have heard that when you lose a parent who
Mhm.
you're no contact from, the grief is different. It is you're grieving, now they will never be what you
Right.
needed. They will never have a chance to be the parent that you needed. And so I kinda talked to her about it, and I was like, "I don't know. I think I might go," and this was a couple years ago. I said, "I think I might go, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know." And she ended up going, and she told me, like, "I regret it."
Yeah.
And she said it was more of the resentment she got from other people in the family who didn't think she deserved to be there. Um, and she said if she could do it over again, she doesn't know that she would go. And I mean, I can't blame her. And watching her experience was kind of eye opening for me too, to be like, okay, maybe this is not for you. Like
Yeah.
going wouldn't be healing for the estranged child. It would be healing,
Yeah.
and she kinda said that, she alluded to it, which I thought this was really, like, profound. Like, she said, like, "My mom got to leave this earth and feel better.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel worse." And she had a really tough, like, grieving period over it, and so that
Yeah.
and she's like, "I don't feel like I owed that. I don't feel like I owed her to feel better." And I just like, we talked about it a little bit recently, and I said, like, yeah, I understand that. Like, I understand that it wasn't for you, but I also think it was a nice thing that you did for her
Yeah.
that, like, I don't know. So that was tough, but I know that's really the next for me. My parents are both 70. So I know that time is not, it's closer than it is far away. So
Yeah.
I'm waiting for those days and for that kind of grief. But again, I don't know how I will handle that when it comes, but I think it's a choice like when you are estranged, you have to make that choice. And
Yeah.
if they reach out, and I don't know if that will happen for me,
Yeah.
but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, I
And
guess.
that's the way.
Mhm,
Sometimes you gotta get to bridges before you can
mhm,
cross them, and I'm
mhm.
not saying don't think about what it would be like, but definitely you'll be older, you'll have a different mindset even still,
Yeah,
and then be able to make a decision. So I
right.
hear you.
Yeah.
And, I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about your story, and the strength in this is, like, you found closure through
Mhm,
release, and that's where you are now.
mhm. Well, thank you for having me. I actually think this is such a cool idea. I listened to another podcast that's, like, about dating, The Dating Detectives, which you should all listen to because it's so good.
Cool.
And I listened to that, but sometimes I'm like, "Man, the format of how people tell their stories, which is similar to how you're doing it, except for you're offering the chance for that, like, end conversation."
Yeah.
Um, I think these are so powerful, and I was thinking, like, "Oh, it'd be cool if they had something like this for, like, estranged parents or estranged adult children," and when I saw your TikTok, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this," following immediately. So and I'm grateful that you, like, took what I said about, like, the no contact thing,
Yes.
um, 'cause, again, it was sometimes you get to that point, it's too late. I don't wanna
Yep.
have my closure. So this for me is closure. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so I appreciate that, and I, like, really appreciate you, like, tolerating my constant schedule changes. So
No problem at all. It's
yes.
really been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much.